For those of you who are not familiar, PunkRockMBA made a video talking about the problems of prog music, mostly focusing on progressive metal, and I think rightfully so. In order to address a number of these points today, I did bring my John Petrucci whiskey out. Partly because it's on theme, but partly also because I guarantee there's going to be some stupid-ass high schooler who's going to say cringe in the comments, and my own schadenfreude will be very satisfied by that. Now, towards the beginning of the video, he says, don't look at this as talking shit, and this is more like your big brother pulling you to the side and telling you things you should work on, which, towards the beginning, I agree, and I take it from that perspective of like, we're not looking at the positives, we're only looking at the negatives. That's what this video is about. It's about addressing things that really are the problems of prog, and I can agree with that to an extent. Towards the back half of the video is where he starts making statements broadly about the genre that I really don't think are accurate, and we're gonna dive into those. I'm just gonna run through this video and hope that this all makes sense in post. So here we go.
What I'm talking about here is progressive rock or metal, aka prog, which refers to stuff that sounds like this, or this. The problem with prog is, in a word, riff salad, which I guess is actually 2 words, but you get my point. It's a genre that's fixated on technique, gear, time signatures, and other technical stuff to the point where they just kind of forget to write songs.
He's saying it's riff salad, that the people listening and making the music are too fixated on riffs, tone, and technique more than they are songs. By that, I am assuming you mean they are focusing too much on things that guitar players find neat, as opposed to composition. That statement I absolutely agree with.
I will use the definition from progarchives.com. Progressive rock bands pushed rock's technical and compositional boundaries by going beyond the standard rock or popular verse-chorus based song structures. Additionally, the arrangements often incorporated elements drawn from classical, jazz, and world music. Instrumentals were common, while songs with lyrics were sometimes conceptual, abstract, or based in fantasy. But more often than not, what prog means is dudes who have a $5,000 guitar rig but no frame for their bed, jacking off with their guitars, trying to be technical for the sake of being technical, and churning out uninspired riff salad that honestly nobody but other guitar nerds cares about.
That's how a lot of people perceive it, especially those from the outside who want to critique the absolutely toxic fan base. That is sometimes how a lot of the younger people or more immature people in the prog scene act. But that is by no means what defines it, which I think is extremely highlighted by the fact that you chose Yngwie Malmsteen to embody that. I agree that Yngwie does embody that description you said, but I don't know anyone who would describe Yngwie as prog. Yeah, it may say that on his Wikipedia page, but that's bullshit. I believe you gave a fair definition of what prog is when taking it from Prog Archives, and I agree with the examples that you chose. But I think a more encompassing and accurate definition is trying to push any genre forward through fusion and experimentation. Something is more progressive by how radical and well adopted it is. If something is very radical, but no one's actually using it, is that actually making any progress? But if everyone is using it, but it's not very radical, I mean, that's just by definition the same shit we've always done. I like to think of it as less of a genre and more of a musical philosophy or method. The Prog Archives definition opens itself to another problem of the genre that you address later.
Number one, to borrow a phrase from my friend Trey at Gear Gods, riffs are not a song. If you listen to a lot of prog fans talk about music, especially progressive metal people, it's always about riffs, as though this is like the atomic unit of a song. And the way that you write a song is by stringing together a bunch of cool riffs and then giving it to the rest of the band so the drummer can do whatever the drummer does and the singer can sing some stuff on top of it or whatever.
Yes, I definitely agree, though I think that's more of a problem of metal than it is specifically a problem of prog. That stems a lot from 80s thrash, from death metal, and from metalcore. Classic prog never had the riff as the basic atom or basic building block of a song problem. Had a lot of other problems, but not that one. Your same critique about being too riff focused can apply to the vast majority of metal today, by a long shot. Though I will agree with you, the prog from the 2010s and onward is especially obnoxious. Fully agree with that.
To the vast majority of people, a song is defined primarily by two things, the vocal melody and the lyrics, especially in the chorus.
That is very much an oversimplification. Sing me the words to Classical Gas or Beethoven's Fifth, both pieces that everyone can hum off the top of their heads and don't necessarily have simple melodies that are just catchy hooks. I get it that he's saying that music today is mostly driven by simple melodies that are easily and immediately consumable, but I think that has a lot less to do with making a song good or bad, and a lot more to do with the fact that people don't like being challenged and people musically are not very educated today. I don't give a fuck who takes offense to that statement. It's verifiably true. While melody is certainly a problem in modern prog, I don't think that should give a pass to lazy, reductive, easy cash grab music. It's perfectly fine to have a discussion of why you do or don't like something for different merits, and the song not having a lot of depth to it doesn't matter. What matters is that you acknowledge there's not a lot of depth to it. Every person in this fucking world can sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It's a great song, but it's not great because it has as much value as Beethoven's fucking Fifth. And pretending or claiming that something like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star has as much actual intellectual value, emotional value that Beethoven's Fifth does is lying to yourself, or you're fucking dumb. Plain and simple. Not saying it's not important, saying doesn't have the depth. Verifiably, not remotely the same fucking depth. Man does not live on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star alone.
It's because a huge part of the prog scene is made up of guitarists. And you know, guitarists, in their mind, guitar is the center of the entire universe. Everything else exists just to elevate and showcase the guitarist. They're almost like pathologically incapable of writing a song where the guitars aren't the focal point of everything.
Agreed, but don't leave drummers out of this one, my man. In the gent and metalcore scene, they are just as bad and obnoxious as the guitar players. I promise you.
And I do kind of blame this on the influence of prog because this was not the case in the 80s, 90s, or even the 2000s when guitar music was a lot more popular.
Oh no, it absolutely was the case. And Eddie Van Halen is the one who ushered that in. When Eddie Van Halen came out swinging his big old fucking dick around on the guitar, everyone wanted to swing their big old fucking dick around on the guitar. That's why you have Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, Eric Johnson, Stevie Ray Vaughan, I'll go on forever. There were a ton of monster virtuosos who wrote amazing stuff like Eddie Van Halen did, like you said in your video. But Yngwie, who you keep using as an example of a prog guitarist, is actually the perfect example of the 80s machismo virtuoso shit that was so over the top and just wrong in the 80s. This is speaking as someone who used to eat that shit up when I was a teenager. That same machismo of trying to be the bigger, badder, faster guitar player than the next guy is the exact same thing that has been carried over into today's prog metal, and to a smaller extent, the math rock, prog rock thing going on. Yngwie represents that machismo far more than he represents prog. It was that overly produced and overly showy sound of the 80s that ushered in 90s grunge.
The fact that Van Halen was such a huge band and had that kind of mainstream success is what made Eddie Van Halen such a transformational figure and enabled him to do so much for guitar and guitar music in general.
And that is what I argue prog actually is. Eddie Van Halen is more prog than Dream Theater, in my opinion. The Beatles are more prog than Yes, in my opinion. If you're going by the definition that Prog Archives uses, but you strip out the parts about having to adhere to a compositional style and structure of classical and jazz, you really get to the heart of it, which is trying to evolve genres, push them forward. And this is where I start to take issue with calling prog a genre, because a genre boils something down to a specific sound, and the philosophy of prog, if you will, is antithetical to that. Or maybe not even philosophy, but the method of prog. Being creative and experimental is one thing and maybe has some merit in it, but how progressive is it actually if no one actually adopts it? Revolutionary and indelible marks in music history, like Eddie Van Halen and the Beatles, are far more the pinnacles of prog to me than Dream Theater will ever be. And I think there's a number of prog heads who need to be able to wrap their heads around that.
How many people got into guitar because of him? And would they have ever discovered him if he took the easy way out of just writing nerdy fusion songs?
Saying that writing nerdy fusion songs is the easy way out is bullshit. I am not saying it is easy to write a hit song by any means, but saying that it's easy to write something that, quote, has no structure, I think you're making more assumptions than you realize you are. Tell you what, you try writing a wankery prog fusion song sometime, and then tell me how many of these immature teen tiny dick people tell you how wonderful you are. Go ahead, I challenge you if it's so fucking easy. I guarantee you're going to be writing a hit song before you get the talent together to write a fusion song that actually is worth a damn. It's almost like it's why you see so many people pursue a pop career as opposed to a fusion career, because it takes less fucking talent. It's more about luck than it is the actual talent that goes into it. I'm willing to say that right here. I'm not saying it doesn't take talent, but it's not the same type of talent. Because really, when you're writing hit songs, it's a numbers game of just cranking out as many simple songs as quickly as possible, and hopefully one of them hits, and less about a moment of inspiration. Deadass, that's what it is.
So if you care about the future of guitar music and rock in general, the best thing that you can do is actually to think less about guitar and more about songs.
Again, he is referring to composition, and again, I scream, yes! I have been trying to preach that good word for a while now.
And number two, nobody gives a shit about how fast you can play.
That is bullshit. Yngwie Malmsteen, the epitome of guitar machismo masturbation, sells out shows specifically because people care how fast he can play. People wouldn't hold competitions for world's fastest drummer or world's fastest guitar player if people didn't actually care how fast people played. I explained some of this in my own video, Why Shred Matters. There's a link to it somewhere. There'll be somewhere. People care because it's not something everyone can do. As a matter of fact, it's something very few people ever will be able to do. And because in order to do it, it takes a shitload of effort and commitment. Now, we will both agree that in the world of musical enjoyment, it's not nearly as important as composing a song that actually moves you. But saying no one cares how fast you can play is patently wrong. Instagram will prove that wrong.
I also blame prog to some extent for a lot of modern rock's fixation on technique. I feel like they've kind of lost the plot and it plays way too much emphasis on being good at your instrument.
First off, blame classical music. The discipline of having proper form and proper technique is rooted in that tradition, not from prog. It carried from classical through jazz and then went into many different disciplines. If you take lessons from a country musician who's teaching you how to play country lead guitar, and he doesn't teach you proper technique as to, how to hit things more accurately and make sure it takes less movement and energy to do the exact same thing, you have a shitty teacher. It's not prog's problem. That's music school's problem. That's the problem of trying to be efficient. Second, I don't think rock places nearly enough emphasis on trying to be good at your instrument. Have you seen Jimmy fucking Page? Have you seen Greta Van Fleet? I have a feeling he's using the term being good at your instrument as a reductive term for playing fast and cleanly. Technique stretches far beyond just speed and just playing a note cleanly to the specifications of your professor or instructor. People who don't like heavy metal guitarists who play very fast or prog seem to critique the fact that it's only obsessed with technique, and I think that emphasizes to me that they don't have any fucking clue what technique actually is. How B.B. King plays one note very slowly is also technique. It's the method by which you accomplish something. And musicians geek out about B.B. King's bends in vibrato just as much as they do John Petrucci playing 16th notes at 180 beats per minute.
Like when rock fans talk about pop, they're oftentimes dismissive, like, oh, anybody can play that stuff, which first of all isn't true. The people who play in pop bands are some of the best musicians in the world who will play rings around almost anybody in metal.
Okay, this needs a serious amount of clarity. Yes, most instrument parts in pop are very easy to play in comparison to other genres. That is why so many people can play them and play them in cover bands, because they're not that difficult to play. But also, yes, most of the hired guns for these pop artists are some of the most incredible musicians you've ever seen in your life who can play circles around almost all metalheads. I agree with that.
I think really this is a question of theory of value. In other words, what defines quote-unquote good music? In the prog view, which you could call the labor theory of musical value, the worth of music is largely defined by how much work went into creating it.
That is incorrect. While there are a number of people in the prog scene who think that something is better because it is harder to play, that quickly evaporates from an individual's perspective the longer you're in the genre. While I'd say prog heads and all in all musicians have a greater appreciation for the work that goes into a song, that is not at all what we value the most, not by a long shot. I can speak for the vast majority of my audience who are mostly prog heads on that one.
On the other hand, you could look at it from another perspective, which I think makes a little bit more sense. In this other view, the only thing that matters is it a good song? And if it is, then it doesn't matter whether it took you 10 years, 10 hours, or 10 minutes to write it.
By what metrics are you defining good? By the other competing theory of value that you said, it would be the amount of time and effort placed into something. Wouldn't that, by definition, fit into your own definition? It's too all-encompassing. Your definition is inherently undefined as to what gives a song value. I'm not saying that what makes a song good is easy to define, and I'm certainly not saying that it's mostly to do with the amount of work put into it. But you open the door for lazy and regressive work to be hailed as high art when the best thing you have for a metric is someone likes it, therefore it's good. Therefore, the more people that like it, the better the song is. Allowing people to exclusively indulge in their ignorance without challenging them isn't good. And you know what? That also applies to the people who only think technically challenging songs are good. Your theory of value does not account for the growth of an individual, which I would argue adds a lot more to the good than the immediate gratification. There is plenty of space for dumb, simple music. There's a lot of it I love, but I would not call Cardi B's music good by almost any measure other than having a few simple hooks.
It's interesting how people think about the value of music so differently than they would anything else. For example, if it took somebody 10 hours to make a sandwich, would that make it a better sandwich? Would you pay more for that sandwich? No, of course you wouldn't, because you don't care how long it took, you only care if it tastes good, right? So why should we think about music any differently?
This is the McDonald's theory of music value, which opens the doors up to all of the problems I just listed. For those of us who appreciate food as both a form of sustenance and an artisan work to be appreciated, yes, the amount of time that goes into the entire production process of your meal is important to us if you can taste the difference, and if it has greater nutritional value, or if it has less guilt associated with it. If the difference isn't noticeable or measurable, then yes, it is very obviously wankery bullshit, and it is wasteful. But if you have an attuned palate that can appreciate the nuance and sophistication of the flavor, maybe that 10 hours is worth it. And funny enough, if we keep down the road of this analogy, in the music world, I would be paying $100 for a Big Mac, which would be going to a Green Day show, while paying only $5 for Wagyu beef, which is an Aristocrat show. If we want to look at your analogy a different way, yeah, in a world where both sandwiches provide the same level of taste, the same level of enjoyment, yes, obviously it doesn't matter whether it took 10 hours or it happened in 2 minutes, as long as you feel satisfied with what you paid for. But what if one sandwich makes you a fat ass and the other one helps trim you into a lean, very healthy human being? And I guess this leads me further down the road of why this is a bad analogy, because you can't claim that every single song is going to be the exact same kind of sandwich. Or even that every song is a fucking sandwich. And if you do think that it's a good analogy, I would say you don't really have a good appreciation and understanding of the art.
I place a lot of the blame for that on prog, because one of the core values of the genre is making music that's technically difficult and complex. They see inherent value in both of those things.
That is incorrect. There is a butt ton of variety in prog that spans from the simple to the overly stupid complicated. And it makes me think that you probably haven't listened to very much prog except for the stuff that all the Gent and Petrucci stands keep pushing publicly all the time. And yes, I agree, that shit's annoying. I still don't understand why people like Dance of Eternity, and I love Dream Theater. People fucking fap to how wonderful that song is. Trust me, I get it. We do see inherent value of what it takes to write some of this music, but most of us also see the inherent value in the amount of work that it takes to write a fantastic and memorable and original hook. A memorable and unique hook you will not find in today's pop music. You will not find it. Writing a really good hook that is not overly derivative is actually pretty difficult work that takes years of writing and writing really shitty songs to finally have that one that pops. And people who really appreciate prog for the artistry and not just for the wankery are people who acknowledge that.
All this fixation on production and technique kind of misses the point. Mastering your instrument is just a means to an end. It's just something that enables you to make great music. It's not a goal in and of itself. And this is a problem. This is part of what's made the whole genre devolve into like guitarists trying to impress each other with how complex and difficult the material is and how sick their tone is, to the point where sometimes I feel like songwriting is almost an afterthought.
I definitely agree, though again, I think that has less to do with prog and more to do with the 80s machismo virtuoso vibe.
I talk to people in bands all the time, and they talk about guitar tone and drum samples 100 times more than they talk about vocal melodies or writing catchy choruses.
While I don't think every chorus needs to be catchy, I do agree most prog bands do not spend enough time figuring out good hooks or figuring out accessible melody.
I think that this mindset of placing value on complexity in art is kind of immature. And I know because I did it too. I think everybody does. It's kind of a natural part of being an artist, I think, is that phase where you really fixate on technique and complexity. But you gotta grow out of that. And I'm not sure that rock has.
I'm pretty sure I get what you're saying here, but I think and hope what you mean is that complexity and technicality would be the most important thing when deciding a song's value. I would agree that would be very immature, but having that as one of many different criteria to judge a song by, I don't think is bad, and I think is actually healthy. It's not always something that matters, but sometimes it does.
I learned to appreciate restraint, and I came to understand that actually it's kind of a cop-out. It's very easy to take this approach of just throwing everything that you possibly can into a piece of art and hoping that some parts of it come out cool, because really that's just like spray and pray. That's throwing shit at a wall and hoping some of it sticks.
Yes, I definitely agree with that statement on face value, but I think that there's more connectedness and coherence in prog than you're giving them credit for in this video. Sometimes it takes a few listens for a song to click, and that's not inherently bad or wrong. If we're looking at just the shitty, indulgent side of prog, yes, it's a cop-out and it's lame. But people tend to place the throwing shit at the wall label on stuff that sometimes they just simply don't understand.
But what's really, really hard is being deliberate. Having a vision of where you want to go, a concept, and then deliberately executing on that, achieving that vision by using only what you need and nothing more. There's a Hemingway quote about this that I really like. Write the story, take out the good lines, and see if it still works. Or to put it in musical terms, write the song, take out the indulgent solos, overplaying, and effects, and see if it still works.
Again, I totally agree, and there are a lot of prog bands that do that.
That's why a song like Royals by Lorde is way more impressive to me than anything Dream Theater has ever done.
And that's why I know you're probably not a very good musician. Why does it matter how good of a musician he is? Are you trying to put him down? No, I'm not trying to put him down. I'm trying to make a statement because the amount of time and commitment that it takes to trying to refine your craft as a musician and a songwriter will absolutely and always impact your perspective on what you decide to enjoy or not enjoy. And it is just as valid a reason as any other fucking reason you're gonna put on the table to enjoy or not enjoy something. Dismissing Dream Theater as only wankery because you don't understand it is the same as the kid who loves Riff Salad because it's perceived as difficult. When I first heard Dream Theater, it wasn't like the heavens opened up before me. I fucking hated it. Dream Theater and a number of other awesome prog bands out there are not stuff that you start with. You have to work your way towards it and hopefully beyond it. That Lorde song that you're talking about, some bullshit about royals, is mostly pop cliches, and yes, it's lazy. I will absolutely say it's lazy. You call it restraint, I mean, maybe a minimal amount. The same people you call Dream Theater clones, you could say that about that Lorde song and a bajillion other pop songs. They're all extremely derivative, and no, that is not a hallmark of pop music. That's a hallmark of today's music, because where the fuck did the originality go? I have way too many problems with this comparison, so I'm not gonna be able to go into all of them right now. Let's just say, as someone who does appreciate the sophistication of simplicity and how an artist chooses to articulate a simple melody, I don't think that you hit it here, my dude.
Whereas now I feel like progressive is really just another label for a sound. They've lost that progressive mindset. I feel like what most people now call progressive isn't actually progressive at all. It's really just imitating what the actual innovators were doing 20, 30, or 40 years ago.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's one of the issues I have with calling prog a genre in the first place. Genres are typically defined first by their sound, and that's basically, like I said, antithetical to prog's purpose. Just like when you were drawing comparisons in your video to Chick Corea. It's always been a problem in the genre because on one hand, you have to move the genre's sound forward, but on the other hand, you're inspired by people who move the genre forward and are listening to their music, and you're going to write things that sound like them. That's just a natural human occurrence, is writing things that you like listening to or have learned on the instrument yourself. But this problem of sounding samey all the time, I think, is a far worse problem in gent and metalcore than it is in any other segment of prog. You said prog fans fixate on tone more than any other genre. I'll agree with that, though I don't always think it's to their detriment. But I think this tone fixation phenomenon also contributes to everything sounding the same. The tone that a lot of these musicians chase is not their own. And thanks to the internet, we took guesswork out of it, so we don't have generations of errors taking us further and further off the track down an accidental creative path. We literally have everyone telling us exactly how to get this tone. We have presets and machines, so everything is sounding very samey.
It's kind of ironic, right? I mean, I think copying Dream Theater is actually the exact opposite of being progressive.
Weirdly enough, that's the same reason I gave when I said I don't think Dream Theater is a prog band anymore. Same thing I said about Periphery. You can check out that video where I talk about what's good prog right up here.
So what am I saying? Am I saying that everyone should dumb their music down and play simplistic crap to appeal to the masses? Absolutely not. What I'm saying is challenge yourself to do both. To push the boundaries creatively and technically, and write catchy, hooky songs that appeal to people who aren't dudes with a guitar fetish.
The only thing I have an issue with this part in the video is the fact that he used Polyphia as an example. Yes, Polyphia is prog and fusion to a certain degree, but tell me you get anything different from these guys after you've listened to 3 songs. Once you've listened to 3 songs, it's like, okay, I got it. If you want to stay prog, if you want to maintain being prog, you can't just make the same shit you've been making forever. That's the problem I find with a lot of bands in general, but especially prog bands. And so far, I have not seen Polyphia substantially evolve in any way.
And don't look at that as a compromise or dumbing down your music or anything like that, because it's actually the exact opposite. It's actually an even more advanced creative challenge because you've added another set of constraints. And as much as a lot of creatives don't like to admit it, constraints actually help creativity.
No caveat here, I 100% agree. And some of those weird throwing shit at the wall songs are actually working within constraints that you don't know about. They just don't always work out so well and sometimes are not apparent to the listener.
Because the honest truth is that it's really not that hard to write this super long, complex, shreddy song with no structure or hooks.
Saying a song is complex but has no structure is a non sequitur. And I think that's where the core of my disagreement is. Where is the line between this is just nonsense and this is a masterfully deep piece that not everyone is going to understand unless you take some time or get some context? For example, Tool or any other person who has tried to write using the Fibonacci sequence. I don't hear how the pieces fit, and neither do you unless someone explains it to you. That's an example of people using limitations working within the Fibonacci sequence that I don't think worked out really great. It was interesting, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I listened to this and now suddenly I have imparted the golden ratio as a part of my being. No, I had no fucking clue what it was until I had to look it up literally 20 minutes ago to film this video. Let me be clear, I am happy you called out a number of the problems in the genre, because as I'm sure a lot of your comments have told you, a number of us feel the same. But your video would have had more validity to me if you would have at least acknowledged a number of the songs from the artists you criticized that defy all the problems that you're talking about. In the beginning, it was like, okay, I see where you're coming from. And then by the end, I was like, I don't know if he knows what prog is. Prog music defying the problems that you talk about are far more common than you gave them credit for. Below by Leprous. The most profound thing about this song is everything they decide not to do. And it makes a very agonizing effect, which is perfect for what the song is talking about. Rock You by Dirty Loops, the tension between hooks and groove and insane virtuosity. Your lady will dance to this prog song. Weakness by Opeth, the emphasis is on what isn't there. By having this emptiness to it, it makes you focus more and appreciate the timbres and the subtlety of what is there. It exaggerates dynamic by staying very quiet through most of the song. Build Me Up, Break Me Down by Dream Theater objectively is prog and objectively has memorable hooks and melodies. I could list a ton more, but I'm going to allow my fans to do that. What are some prog songs that you guys think completely fly in the face of what PunkRockMBA had to criticize about? Let us know in the comments down below. If you like this video, if you like what I do on this channel, hit the like, leave that comment, support me on Subscribestar. Link to Subscribestar is in the description down below. And you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Become the Night. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next video. Rock on.